Thank you all for coming. This is a treat for me, and I want to thank Young Hae for setting this up and against gosh knows how many odds were against this kind of a talk. But what I'd like to talk about is obviously psychology and alien abduction. I am not a psychologist. I have not been abducted. I am, however, an alien. Oh, wait a minute. I'm alienating. That's what the word is. I'm alienating, as people like to say. What this means is that I have to tap the next slide. Okay. We're going to ask a question. And the question is, I don't know if you can hear me through this. Can everybody hear me? Do I even need this? It does? Okay. If abductions do not exist, what are the consequences of their non-existence? Which is an awful strange thing to ask. It's not really a question. It kind of has these suppositions in it that are hidden in the words. But we'll just take it at face value. I want to start out with a list of what I call comfortable facts and ideas that everybody can agree to. Now, what I'm going to be talking about here primarily is people who are skeptical, and I hope that there are people who are skeptical in the audience, because if you just accept this phenomenon wholeheartedly, automatically, something is wrong with you. So you have to accept, you have to be skeptical. It is the normal and natural and responsible response, if I can use that word almost twice. So, abductions do not happen in reality, they are produced in people's minds. Now the idea here is that with the UFO phenomenon, there's a gray area. People can they see something out in the sky, and they in fact are seeing something out in the sky, or close down to them, or on the ground, and they can be mistaken. That's the gray area. You see a light in the sky at night, UFO researchers don't investigate those anymore. And the error rate is so high, it's unworthy of attention. But the fact is that for all sightings, there's still a gray area. It could be a mistake. Natural phenomenon, man-made phenomenon, whatever. With abductions, it's happening or it's not. It's happening or it's internally generated through your mind. It's brain cells crashing with each other, if I may be technical about this. It's, welcome. There's something, with abductions, it's an either-or situation. Most people think that it is not happening, therefore it is psychologically derived. It is derived from someone's brain. Another comfortable fact, an idea, is the evidence for it. It is hard to imagine a weaker form of evidence than the evidence for alien abductions. It is human memories with all their problems, as opposed to cat memories with all their problems. It is retrieved through hypnosis with all its problems, and believe me, hypnosis has plenty of problems, lots, and administered by amateurs such as me with all my problems. And then you come out with the most extraordinary claim in the history of mankind. It's obviously impossible that this could be happening with that form of evidence. Memory is inaccurate. It degrades over time. I am a living testament to that. You asked me what I did yesterday? I have to think hard and long. Every day I get older, I have to think a little longer. People confabulate, that is to say, they make things up, even though they don't even know they're making it up. In memory, they think that they had some sort of an event, that they went someplace, and they didn't. I think that various things happened in my past that I learned didn't happen. Oliver Sacks, the famous psychiatrist, I guess, wrote an article about this long event that had happened. He remembered clearly, and it turned out in those later years he realized it had never happened. He just sort of came out of his mind in some way. So, memory is a problem. And since this phenomenon is derived from memory, need I say more? Hypnosis is untrustworthy. People can be subjected to suggestions by the hypnotist. People invent things they remember happened to them. Most U.S. courts do not accept hypnotically derived testimony. The key thing here is that people can be subjected to suggestions, that is to say, or suggestions sometimes. This happens all the time by hypnotists who have an agenda. The agenda is, this is a transformational, consciousness-raising attempt by friendly, benevolent beings, light beings, real beings, who are here to, now you fill in the blank, cure cancer and stop war, tell us to lay down our atomic weapons and live together hand in hand in peace and harmony, raise us to a higher state of consciousness, transform us into members of a galactic community. Whatever the agenda is, some hypnotists can in fact inflict that on people who didn't expect that to be coming out of their own consciousness. That does happen. I call this incompetent hypnosis. I call this hypnosis that is, it's administered by amateurs. There's no course on how to do abduction hypnosis. Certified hypnotists who are professionals have absolutely no idea how to do this kind of hypnosis. They are the same as the amateurs. There's no professionalism in this field. So they have no idea what the abduction phenomenon is like, therefore they don't know when people are confabulating, they don't know when they're saying things that are not necessarily true, they don't know when they're putting words in people's minds. They're clueless, even though they're professional hypnotists. But, as I said, hypnosis is the way we get most of our testimony. People sometimes do not tell the truth. That is to say, they just lie. Of the thousands and thousands of cases that we have 3 where people lied. Mainly 2 of them to write an article. Reporters who wanted to write an article claimed that they were an abductee and that was for it. And they were caught right away because they had no idea what the abduction phenomenon was about. And when they started talking to an experienced hypnotist, something was amiss. The third one was, as we say in the halls of academe, a nutcase, who seemed to be a perfectly fine person. This did not happen to me, I'm pleased to say. Psychologists and other professionals, and I'll talk about this in a second, have reasonable explanations for abduction accounts. The biggest one among the psychological community is sexual abuse in childhood. You see, the abduction phenomenon is reproductively oriented, so there's a certain amount of reproductive orientation. And as a result, it gives an entree into members of the psychological community to say, well, the reason that you're having these dreams, or whatever they are, is because you were sexually abused in childhood. There are several problems with this thesis which virtually all psychologists have on the tip of their brains when an abductee walks in. It always says it's the most common diagnosis in the psychological community. To the best of my knowledge, there has never been a single peer-reviewed article in a peer-reviewed journal that shows how this works, where a person who's sexually abused as a child then in some way has these fantasies that come out of having reproductive procedures done by aliens. That's very interesting. I would like to see how that works. I would be interested in that. There's no evidence for it whatsoever. This is in the zero, let's put it this way, the evidence-free zone. But it's fun to say, because it sounds sort of psychological. You know what I mean? It kind of has that psychological ring to it. There's no proof of this whatsoever. The second most important criticism of the abduction phenomenon is sleep paralysis. And in fact, there is such a thing as sleep paralysis, where people are either waking up or they're going to sleep, usually when they're waking up, and they get a sense that they can't move, they get a sense that they're almost floating, not quite, but floating, and they get a sense that maybe there's someone in the room, I'm not sure. Thus, the abduction phenomenon has been solved. This is very, very common today also. Those are the two major events that have happened. Diagnoses that have happened. Then there's popular culture osmosis. Well, people see a television show about aliens and then 35 years later, they think they're living it. And consequently, and this has been applied lots of times. Once again, there's no proof, number one, that the person ever saw that television show, which you'd think they'd have to, that would be a prerequisite for this diagnosis. But in fact, oftentimes people have seen it, and sometimes, and most of the time, 90% of the time, they haven't seen it. And they don't know what the person's talking about. But it gets into popular culture, and they just sort of absorb it. Now we're getting into these murky concepts to try to explain this phenomenon. And that's an explanation. Makes sense to me. Then there's just problems with hypnosis. We talked about that before. That does happen. That happens, yes. Hypnosis suggestion. The problem is, most hypnotists don't have any clue about what to say about abduction. So it's hard to place inside of a person's mind something you don't know about. But then there are people who do know about it, who do abduction research, and can in fact present images and ideas to people who will absorb it into their own minds and come out with stories. That happens every once in a while. We will see that. Yeah, that does happen actually. There are people, this is a common early diagnosis, crazy people. People are crazy, that's why. And people are crazy. I can attest to that. People are crazy. There were lots of people who are really walking around seemingly normal. But this is true. There's people who have fantasy-prone personality. Gamers. They play video games, role-playing games, and they really get into it. I mean, it becomes their whole lives. One of the secretaries in the history department at Temple young day was like that. That's all she lived for was games. It's all she could talk about other than what she did at work. And she was a member of Gaming Network, and her husband was a gamer, and this and that. Okay, maybe you're playing at being abducted. Maybe that's what's happening, you know. Hallucination and mass hallucination. Now, hallucination might be just sort of, if you close your eyes and you begin to see a lattice work, well, that's called a hallucination. Sometimes, at least one person called it that, UCLA professor. Or there could be more elaborate hallucinations, and there's mass hallucination, and there are examples of mass hallucination. There was one in the United States in 1945, there was one in Thailand maybe 10 years ago. They usually make the papers, they're so rare. You usually read about them. There are examples, you know, of these things that are written up. It's unusual, but it does. Oh, I remember the Seattle Seattle, Washington, windshield pitting hallucination that took place in 1953. It was thought that because of atomic tests in the Pacific Ocean, that radiation was floating over Seattle, Washington, which is in the upper northwest of the United States, and causing their windshields to pit. That's a little bit of a stretch, just right off. But people would get frightened of this, and they would run out and take a look at their windshield, and sure enough, there were pits there. What more do you need for evidence? If you went out and looked at your windshield anyway, in those days, with the kind of glass they used, all windshields had pits. And, people just didn't notice them before. But there is that. These have all been used for examples of what causes the abduction phenomenon. Temporal lobe lability, which means it's constantly changing your temporal lobe. It's unstable. Michael Persinger, this is Michael Persinger's favorite. He's a professor of neurobiology at Laurentian University in Canada. Says, well, you see, what he does is he's got this whole idea for the abduction phenomenon, and it's simple. What you do is you attach electrodes to a person's temporal lobes. You go to Igor, who's standing at a giant switch on the wall. You have him pull it down, and some people, not all, but some people might feel like they're floating. And some people might feel that there's somebody in the room. That's it. I've solved the abduction phenomenon. He has written in maybe 20 articles. But he's able to transfer that to the real world. You see, when earthquakes happen, sometimes there's a release of energy. And it's like ball lightning. It's a static type of electricity. That static electricity can hit somebody in the head. And if they think at that time that they're seeing a UFO because there's a ball of light there, what more evidence do you need to explain abductions? I mean, that's where he stops. I have explained it all. There's a desire for desire for publicity, recognition, or as one person said, they want to lead a glamorous life by claiming that they're completely crazy. This is Phil Klass for those people who know him. That was his. And there are more than 35 different explanations of this, almost all mutually exclusive. None of them, not a single one of them, deal with the evidence for the abduction phenomenon. None of them. They are just taken out of the air, just as people sometimes are, I guess, and portrayed as being evidence. However, maybe they are. These are all very comfortable facts, yes. Bystanders don't see people being abducted. You'd think if people were abducted that we'd have millions of cases of people standing around saying, I just saw somebody flying out of a window. Or whatever it is, you'd think that would happen. It doesn't. Mostly. Most of the time. If aliens were here, they would land on the, usually in America we say the White House lawn. They'd land on 10 Downing Street, blocking traffic. They would want to speak to our scientists, our politicians, our powerful people. There would be an exchange of gifts. They would cure cancer and stop war, and we would give them a box of biscuits. I'm not sure how this would work, but this is popular culture. This is the idea of contact. There would be a formal contact. This is popular culture in the scientific community. This is what they think might happen. There's no evidence for this at all. It's dreamed up. This is just stuff that's dreamed up. It has no merit in real world. But maybe it would happen that way. Not only that, but you can't get here from there. How many times have you heard this concept from scientists? This is a big universe. I don't know if you've noticed, but there are hundreds and hundreds of stars up there. And you can't get here from there. Traveling at the speed of light, even. It would take 5,000 years to get here from X galaxy or from X star, or 1,000 years or 100 years or whatever it is. You can't get here from there. And that's, for us, true. That is true. This is a fact for us. This is an absolute fact. Unless you decide you're going to have hundreds of generations of people being born on. There are ways you can get around this. And there's the wormhole business, that the universe is so completely warped that you can go from one side to the other in a few seconds or whatever. That there are ways that physicists, astrophysicists are trying to get around that. But in general, that is still the argument you hear from the scientific community. They can't get here from there. Therefore, they are not here. That is what they say. Now we're going to uncomfortable facts. You notice I'm not using the word ideas here. Just facts. Abductees are physically missing from their normal environments when they are abducted. That is a fact. Police have been called. Search parties have been sent out. Children have searched for their parents. Parents have searched for their children. Panic results. I will give you a story. Go to my notes. What story should I give you? What story should I make up? A woman who was an abductee she had a small child. She was the little girl was 4 years old or so. She was going out for the evening and had her sister come and babysit the daughter. So they're sitting there on a couch watching television, whereupon the sister gets an idea. I think I'll take a bath. I can go into this whole incident more deeply, but so she draws a bathtub, gets into the bath, and picks up her novel that she was reading, and she starts to read it, and suddenly she puts down. She realizes, like, an hour and a half, 2 hours later, she's laying there, sitting there in a bathtub, reading it, but she's on the same page. She immediately thinks, the little girl, oh my God. The little girl had been sitting on the couch watching television. She jumps up, she grabs her clothes, she runs downstairs to the TV, where the TV was. Girl is gone, not on the couch. She runs up to the bedroom, yelling for the girl. Girl's not in the bedroom. She goes throughout the house, where all the rooms, the closets, everywhere. She's going into extreme panic. She does it twice. She goes back down. She looks on the couch. Not there. She looks upstairs. Now she's panicking. She runs out onto the sidewalk and starts yelling for her. And there's a neighbor who's standing there saying, "What's the problem? What's happening?" She says, "My niece is gone. My niece is gone." He says, I'll go and look for her." He goes into the house. He looks on the couch. There she is, sleeping on the couch. This is abduction. This is what happens when people are abducted. This is not going to happen to anybody else on this earth. This is not possible. She wasn't on the couch. There would be no reason for this woman to run into the street in a panic. Simple as that. Another one. I could tell. Should I tell another one? I have lots and lots of these kinds of stories. Lots and lots and lots of them. A young girl in Puerto Rico wakes up, her parents are gone. Strike that. I have to remember how this was. Wakes up, her parents are gone. She's worried. Where is my mommy and daddy? Where are my mommy and daddy? She looks all over, mommy and daddy gone. She runs out of the house looking for them, closes the door behind her, door locks. She goes running for the neighbors. The neighbors come, pound on the door, nobody's there. House is empty. They look in the windows, nobody's there. Everybody's concerned, everybody is worried. Next thing you know, Well, the mother or the father opens up the front door. What's happening? What's going on here? And it's not possible. See, I have starker images. This is typical stuff. This is typical of the problem where people are missing. They are missing. If they weren't missing, we'd know where they were. And I wouldn't be standing here talking to you. If they were down at a corner pub, kicking them back, and then telling the wife or the husband, oh, these aliens came down and picked me up, that's why. We'd know it. In other words, when people are missing, nobody sees them, ever. They are not seen by anyone. It's not like independent people come forward and say, I know this person. She said, or he said, they've been abducted 1,000,000 times, and I've seen them during this time. That just is not part of the abduction phenomenon. People, when they come back, they have unusual marks and scars, bumps and bruises on their body that they don't know the origin of. They don't know where they come from. Now, let's just say you have a 7-inch scar. This is an actual case on your body, and you don't know where it came from. And your mother or your father doesn't know where you came from, where it came from. That is not possible. That's just not possible. What do you mean? You don't know where it came from. A scar is a trauma. You're going to have blood. Lots of it. It's going to cause a scar. It's not a cat scratch. You're going to have a scab. It's going to hurt. It's going to take a long time to form scar tissue. If you don't remember it, and it happened to you as a child or a baby, your parents are going to remember it. It's going to happen that way. In this situation, it doesn't happen that way. One day, I had a session with a woman. She was about 42 years old. She used to drive 700 miles to see me, filling me with guilt at the time, I must say. We did a session about what had happened to her, and she later became what would be called here an Anglican priest, an Episcopalian priest in the United States. And so the next day I was at my local Sainsbury pushing a trolley, because I do all the shopping, and I'm going around a corner, and there she is, standing there. She usually goes home, she stays for lunch, she goes back down to Virginia. And I said, gosh, Jackie, what are you doing here? So I was just gobsmacked. And she said, well, I called your wife and she told me where you were. I wanted you to see something. I said, oh, okay. She says, look at this. And she shows me the area here in her hand, between her thumb and her forefinger, is a 1-inch long scar in it that wasn't there the day before. And she says, look at this. And then on her other hand, there's another 1-inch scar right there that wasn't there the day before. I saw her hands the day before, and they weren't there. I am telling you something that is biologically impossible. Biologically impossible. This cannot happen, and I have seen it happen. This is not possible. But it was. It was there. People are sometimes abducted in groups and can confirm each other's abductions. Groups. Once you say the word groups, and you don't mean groupers, the fish, when you say the word groups, all psychological diagnoses begin to crumble. They can, oftentimes they're family units, family groups. Maybe they got together, even the little kids, to lie about this for reasons that would be inconceivable. But they are abducted in groups. Here's an example of strangers. There's a woman who I worked with who was born in Pakistan. She and her husband lived in the United States for a very long time, and he was an engineer, and they were well-to-do. They lived up on a hill in a small town, and because they were up on the hill, they had a long sloping driveway that led all the way down to the street where their mailbox was. And she was extremely concerned about the fact that people would find out that she had these abduction experiences because, as we'll see later on, people tend to keep it to themselves. But as she went down there to get the mail, and she walked down there, she noticed that there was a person with a tow truck, a truck with an open bed in the back, and that something was wrong with it. The bonnet was open, and the guy was doing something with the engine. So she looked over him, and he got out, and he sort of looked at her, and he gave her a strange look. And she didn't know him. He came over to her, and he says, "I know you. I've seen you before. We were together on board a UFO. I saw you. You and I were together on board a UFO. We were together." She said, "No, not me. No." And she ran back up the driveway. But he recognized her. There are other cases of that. There are other cases where that happens. That means they physically shared the same dream. The plot gets thicker, in other words. How can that happen? How, of all the people in that area, for him to say that to, makes no sense to me. Let's put it that way. Bystanders do see people being abducted. It's rare, but it happens. When you say people don't see other people being abducted, that's wrong. It's factually incorrect. Family units see other people. Kids see their parents being abducted, or parents see their kids being abducted. Every once in a while, people who are not abducted at all will see it. My late colleague Bud Hopkins wrote a book called Witness, the Brooklyn Bridge abductions, where he found 24 direct and indirect witnesses to this woman being taken out of her apartment and into a UFO in the middle of Manhattan, New York, USA, the world. And they stopped, all the cars were stopped on the Brooklyn Bridge. Some of them thought they were seeing a Hollywood movie. Well, it's just a movie, although how they could do that, they didn't know. There was a UFO there, and it was these beings around this person coming right out of her apartment window. Lived on a high-rise, as they call it, near the Brooklyn Bridge. This does happen from time to time. When people are abducted, they have absolutely no idea where their abductors are from. You see, in Hollywood land, the being from outer space, if it's a nice being, of which are very few nice aliens now in Hollywood, because it's much more fun to have them being killer aliens. A much better movie. I mean, you want them to stomp on Tokyo, you want them to kill, and then die in some way at the end. That's satisfying. But in the old days, when they used to come down, the first thing they would do was say their name, where they're from, and why they're here. My name is Klaatu. Anybody know that name? That's an actual name. There you go. A couple of people. This is from the Day the Earth Stood Still, 1951. And they would say, why they come in peace, I mean, whatever, and I live in the planet Vortex, or whatever it is, and they were almost always sure to assure people that there is a God, or something like that, who lives on Vortex with them, or whatever it is. And in this phenomenon, nobody knows any backstory here. Nobody knows where these beings are from, why they're here, or anything about that stuff. They don't know anything at all. It's zero. You'd think that if this were psychological, some of these beings would just come up to them and say, "Hi, my name is Zanuck," or whatever starts with an X or a Z. That's Z, I should say here. Sorry. That's. You would have that from time to time. We get that. We don't get that ever. That's just not part of this phenomenon. I've been studying this phenomenon. I've done my own hypnosis since 1986. I've looked at maybe 1,150 abduction events. I have never heard that. You'd think if this were psychological, you would, at least once. Doesn't happen. When people return, they return with unusual things happening to them, mistakes. Sometimes they return with their clothes on inside out. Some articles of clothes might be on backwards, like their underwear, which is not something that I particularly like to do, except in special occasions. But there's no rhyme or reason. If they're asleep, they wake up, their pajamas are on inside out or on backwards. They say, "What? Did I get up in the middle of the night and take my pajamas off, then put them back on backwards? Did I do that?" Or the pajamas are at the foot of their bed. They return sometimes from abduction and their watch is missing. What happened to my watch? Search all through the house, everywhere, here, there, and everywhere. Never find the watch ever again. Or a week later, 2 weeks later, find the watch in a prominent place, which they have looked at 100 times. But oftentimes, never get it back. Every once in a while, somebody will return wearing someone else's clothes. How would you like that to happen to you one day? Let's just say you go to bed, you wake up, and you're wearing somebody else's clothes. The mind cannot grasp that fact. Woman sends me a t-shirt once, the woman I worked with for a long time. She woke up, she had just bought a brand new, I don't know if they have this store here, Victoria's Secret, do they have this in England? It's a ladies' garment store, so to speak. Victoria's Secret, and she was wearing, this was the second time she'd worn this nightgown, and she was very pleased with it. And she came back wearing a t-shirt, and it said, I think it was 13th Annual Tagora Marathon. This woman does not run, that's all I can tell you. She does not run, nor has she ever been to Japan, where Tagora is, about 150 miles northeast of Tokyo. And she never got her Victoria's Secret gown back. That was it. Gone. She mailed me the t-shirt. I mailed it to Bud Hopkins. Had it somewhere. Sometimes there are other mistakes. If they're abducted from an automobile, they're sometimes returned to the wrong side of the road. Now here in England that might be easy for Americans, but if you're in the United States, it's you get returned to the wrong side of the road, the adrenaline starts pumping immediately. You know, you're, oh my God, what has happened? I must have fallen asleep, jumped over the fence separating the road and the median strip without waking up as the car hit the fence and pounded to the other road and now is straightened itself out and is heading directly towards traffic, and now I'm waking up. Sounds logical to me. Or sometimes I return to an area and I don't know where they are. Where the hell am I? And they're miles away from where they should have been. It's not like they made the wrong turn. And you just think, oh God, isn't this the place where I'm supposed to go? And you just keep going, and then you realize I'm lost. This is different. They were driving on the regular side of the road, everything was fine, and the next thing you know, they're miles away. They don't remember going off the street or not. I mean, they don't remember it, period. They didn't go off the street. People are returned to homes that are locked from within, with what we call deadbolt locks. You have to use a key to lock from inside. You can't get in. One woman found herself in her back area, near her patio. All the doors were locked from inside. She found a baseball bat, a cricket club, a baseball bat there, and had to break one of the patio doors to get back in. Coming back from what she said was an abduction. The question is, how did she get out of that house if all the doors were locked inside? This happens to children quite often. The parents cannot understand how the child got outside of the house. All the doors are locked. How did that happen? Happened to a guy in a dormitory at a college. This was Eastern College, which was a Baptist university actually, in Philadelphia. He was asleep, woke up, he was in the bushes with his underpants on, and he had to work his way up without anybody seeing him. It was a co-educational dorm, and go up in the elevator up to the 8th floor or wherever his room was, and then pound on his door so his roommate would open up and say, "What the hell are you doing out there?" And the door is locked from the inside. These people are not sleepwalkers. This is a whole different world. Abductions seem to be intergenerational. That is to say, when abductions begin in infancy and they continue into old age, they stop somewhere along the line when they begin, and the children of abductees will be abductees as well. In other words, the problem here is that when a person says that they have had abduction experiences, marries a person who is not an abductee, and they have 4 children, the normal genetics are not at work. All 4 children will eventually report abduction events if in fact they remember that they're having them. That means that what you have is a spreading out phenomenon within the population. And because it's intergenerational, it goes from generation to generation and spreads through because they marry non-abductees on the whole. That means that it keeps pace with the growth of the population, essentially, if not exceeded. My colleague and I, Bud Hopkins, in 1991, oh my goodness gracious, I haven't even come to the beginning slide yet. My colleague and I conducted, along with the sociologist Ron Westrom, a poll of almost 6,000 people in 3 2,000-person scientifically determined sweeps through the United States, all above the age of 18, with a margin of error of only 1.4% to find out how many people were abductees. We could not ask that question, and we did not ask that question, but we had a series of questions that we could ask where abductees were answering yes to in the 80th percentile and above, and non-abductees were answering no to in the 80th percentile or above. And so that these questions were pre-tested and honed down. Answering one of 10 questions would have meant that they were abductees. We got with 6,000 people in a face-to-face, clipboard in hand poll that they don't do anymore, and in an omnibus poll, that's to say, they had to ask other questions too to make this worthwhile for them to do. But all the other questions that were asked from other organizations were political or sociological questions as opposed to advertising questions. So the people who were answering these questions knew that this was a serious poll. And the numbers were extremely high. They were 7%, 10%. It was horrible. We couldn't go through with them. We couldn't go public with them. So we became rigidly conservative. We divided top questions and bottom questions, the most influential questions and the least influential questions into those two halves, top and bottom. Answering yes to any one of them could have meant abduction activity. You had to answer yes to at least 4 out of the 5 top questions, 5 top questions. If you didn't, you were dropped from the poll. You could have therefore answered yes to like 7 of them or 8 of them or whatever it was and be dropped from the poll. We got the number down to 2%, which is crazy because 2% of 330 million people is I don't do higher math, but I think it's around 6 million people or more. But we knew that already by 1991, thousands of people, thousands and thousands of people had contacted me and my colleagues about what might have been their abduction experiences. You have to examine each one to see whether or not, which is why you can't really tell we're estimating. But it is far more common than any of us had ever imagined before we conducted those polls. There's something called the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory Test, which can detect people who have serious mental problems. Abductees have been taken to them. They seem to be normal people with a higher degree of wariness. They might be more concerned about who's going to get them, for example. That was done some years back. There are people who are crazy, who are, I may use that term, who are abducted. It mirrors the population. It mirrors the population. There's nothing unique about abductees. They don't have special attributes or special qualities. People say, well, right now, abductees have Rh negative blood. The answer is no. That's the answer. Next. Memory degradation. The problem here is I have examined many abductees, as the sign says right here, with events that took place days or hours before even, where memory is really good. It hasn't degraded since they were 6 years old. Do a session when they were 6. I don't like to do that because I know memory is not complete. It's very difficult. But I have done that. And as I said, even hours before. Memory has nothing to do with it in that regard. People sometimes remember their experiences in full detail without hypnosis, leaving the whole hypnosis argument in tatters. It is the majority of people who don't remember it and have to have hypnosis, that is true, but lots of people remember bits and pieces of abductions or whole abduction activities without hypnosis. That is a fact. The phenomenon cuts across all groups in the society. What do I have here? The economic, educational, intellectual, racial, ethnic, national, religious, political, geographic. It doesn't matter. It is global. It goes all around the world. We have reports from everywhere. Everywhere. They all say the same thing. I worked with a guy from the West African country of Mali. He said exactly the same thing as everybody else. I worked with this woman from Pakistan. I worked with a woman from Romania. I worked with a guy from Mexico. I worked with people from the UK. I worked with people from every state in the nation, practically, in the United States. It does not matter. They all say the same thing. This is actually out of... When they do talk, they speak directly against their own interests. I like to work, I'll work with anybody and everybody, but I like to work with people who have doctorates. MDs, medical doctors, doctors of philosophy, doctors of education, LLDs, that is attorneys in the United States, law letters as it's called. Let's just say a psychiatrist who I worked with comes to me and to want to explore their abduction experiences. Do you think that this would be very good for them if they were to tell all the people they know that as a psychiatrist they have been abducted by little gray men from another planet? This is something that they fully are aware of how disastrous it could be on their careers. Psychologists, therapists I worked with, university professors. To say something like that in any audience is absolutely ruinous. They understand that. They get it. Which is why I have to say that I will never betray who they are, will never say who they are, or who their employer is, or anything like that. Even if they, unless they especially give me in writing the permission. And when they've done that, I've never done it anyway because it might be too late and they'll regret it. I've never done it. It's disastrous, period. And yet, they come and they tell it to me, and they know it's disastrous. They understand that. There's no reason on this earth for them to say the exact same things that everybody around the world is saying to me. So, let me just go on to the next one. I'm getting late. People describe events that make their stories sound fallacious. They understand that. Here's a simple, easy example. When I first began to do this research in '86, by 1987, it took me about 6 months to understand that I had no idea what I was doing. And it took me 6 months to figure that out. Anyway, and when I finally did, I began to put controls in place and so forth so that I could control the situation a lot more. And remember, I know what confabulation was. I know when people were veering off into dreamland and that sort of stuff, it made no sense. And once I put controls into place, like asking deliberately misleading questions, for example, in very subtle ways to see whether they're going to go for it or not, that seem perfectly logical but aren't, and repeating something that they said, they'll tell me 2 hours worth of material and I'll repeat it back to them and get something wrong. A really minor thing to see if they notice it because they just made it up, and they catch on. No, I turned left here, not right, I turned left. And then things like that, there's all sorts of other ways of doing it. And that actually helped me. The point is, though, that one time I'm doing a session with this woman, and she says to these beings are in my room, this is a night one, beings are in my room, and we're walking towards the window, and there's a light coming in the window, and we're going out of the window, and I'm flying, going up. Hey, whoa, wait a minute. Let me back you up a little bit. Now you're bringing you towards the windows, all right? Yes. Do you open the window? No, I don't open the window. Do they open the window? No, they don't open the window. Does the window open by itself in some psychokinetic way, whatever? No, they say, I think I'm floating right through the closed window. And then this one said, does anybody else ever report that? Not knowing that absolutely everybody reports that. Or they go through a wall, or they go through the ceiling. If they're making this up, they would say, I'm walking towards the window, I'm opening up the window, now we're going out. Because that sounds right. To say you're going through a closed window is adding a fact that makes all your testimony sound wrong. Why would you make that up? Why would you say that? It's ridiculous. You say you open the window. Well, what's the problem? The point is, nobody says that. They all go through the walls of the windows, wherever. Every once in a while they'll walk out of the door regularly into the backyard and then be abducted. That happens. But in this situation, that is what happens in the abduction phenomenon. Psychologically, that makes no sense. Same thing with telepathy. I say, and I just had a case of this last week. I say, well, when this being is standing near you, does he say anything to you? No. Well, do you get a sense of communication? Yes, I have to do X or Y or Z. What they're saying is, they're not, as she said, he's not talking through his mouth. Telepathy is the standard form of communication. There's no reason for that to be the standard form of communication. If this were psychological, they would say, yeah, they're talking to you. I can hear them through my ears. Yeah, they're talking to me through their mouths, and they got weird accents. I cannot, they have weird accents. That's what they would say at least part of the time. They don't say that. That is not something that's part of the abduction phenomenon. And they don't know that. These people don't know enough about the abduction phenomenon. Now maybe they do because books have written about it, but there's plenty that hasn't been written about it, that they still say. But this just in the beginning, this would just, it falsifies their story. It makes their story sound false, you know. Of course they would be talking. That's what you would expect through their mouths and all that. But that doesn't happen. They all describe all around the world the same procedures, the same aliens, if I may use that word. The only time I've used that word in this presentation, you will notice. The same surroundings, hallways, the corridors, the rooms, the walls, the ceilings, the tables, the doorways, all of which have a certain unique look. It's not like a regular room. They all describe the same thing. They all describe the same demeanor of the abductors. They all describe the same sounds or lack thereof. The same neural engagement procedures, which if anybody wants to know, I can describe that. And other events, manipulating people. How do people get up? How do people walk? And how are they manipulated? I'm writing this down here so I can remember it. When they return to the normal environment, they forget about it instantly. Instantly. This is a clandestine phenomenon. This is secret. It has been secret since the beginning, and it remains secret. And this secrecy, since this is a global phenomenon, is exceptionally successful. You're looking at technology. This is technology. This is all it is. It's biotechnology and it's regular technology. But that's what it is. I'm coming to the end here. Abductees do not know what the procedures are for that are being done to them. They describe the same ones. They don't know why they've been abducted. They don't know the purpose of the technology that's used on them. And they skip over certain parts all the same way. I'm in a room. I'm on the board. Now I'm in a room. Now they want me to get on a table. I get on a table. I lie on a table. I say, and I know right off, I said, well, if you're lying on the table, what's the position of your arms? Oh, they're down on my line. I say, your arms are touching your sides? Yes. Well, can you feel your clothes? Pause. No. It's a logical question. No. Well, they skipped over the part where they took their clothes off. That's a standard skip. I mean, what kind of a phenomenon is it where people forget the exact same things over and over again? They skip over these. Then sometimes I'll back them up to where they got their clothes off. Then now they're coming down, and they're heading back to their car, to their picnic, to wherever they were from. And I'll say, well, when you're coming down, can you feel your clothes? You have your clothes on? Oh, yes. Oh, they forgot when they put their clothes on. And there's other things, that there's standard skips that I've learned to look for. The phenomenon is just extraordinary in every single aspect. Reports of this phenomenon are extraordinary. There has never been anything like this in human history. There's never been a phenomenon like this. Now people say, what about ghosts? Well, the thing about ghosts is, when did the British Psychical Society, when was it founded? 1880s or something like that. They were basically looking at fairies and ghosts and things like that. We know about as much about ghosts now as we did 140 years ago. We don't know which ghosts go haunting and other ones don't. We don't know where they get their fuel from, or if they need it at all. We don't know what they do in their downtime. You know what I mean? Are they telling jokes somewhere with each other? Or what are they up to? We don't know anything about them other than people say they see them. With the abduction phenomenon, we are swimming in depth. We know a tremendous amount about this subject. It's just astonishing. All of which is perfectly consistent with material we've been learning before, except when we have made a mistake and we thought something was important and it wasn't. And as we now have a picture, it's like a picture puzzle. We know what the picture is. We can see it's a seascape. There's a battered old boat on the side. There's seagulls, some of the pieces are missing, but we can see what this is. If abductions are not happening, if this is not, if everything I've just said is not true, if they're not happening, then this has got to be the most important mental, cognitive situation, problem, say whatever it is, that we have ever discovered. If this phenomenon is not happening, and people are abducted in groups and all the rest of that stuff, we have stumbled onto something of tremendous import. I cannot emphasize that enough. Therefore, one would assume that social scientists, neurologists, neurobiologists, or even neobiologists, and others in the academic and scientific community would be wrestling each other, tumbling over each other to be first in line to study this subject. However, the academic and scientific communities in the US and the UK and Europe and almost everywhere practically, not everywhere, but almost everywhere, are fiercely against the study of this subject. There have been academics who studied it. I've been one. There was a guy named John Mack who, at Harvard University, who was an abduction researcher. There was a guy named Leo Sprinkle at the University of Wyoming, and they led hard lives oftentimes when it came to this. You do this only if you have job permanency. Otherwise, it is, as I tell graduate students who want to work in this area, it's a career killer. If you write material that says that this might be happening, you will never get a job in academics in the United States, ever, and that is true. No person will ever get one, ever, because there's something wrong with them. If, however, you say that the phenomenon is not happening, and it's all in people's minds, you will never get a job in academics, because everybody knows that. What kind of a dissertation is this? You're just reinventing the wheel. What's the matter with you? So I tell them to wait, get a job, get job permanency, tenures, they call it in the United States if they're going to be in the academic system. And then, as long as you don't ever want to be promoted after that, and then you can start looking into the subject. Otherwise, stay as far away from it as you can possibly be. And it kills me to say that. I don't want to say that. I want people to study this. Obviously. Just think of the fact that it's not happening. The mind cannot grasp not happening. Well, as UFO astronomer, a UFO researcher, and Alan Hynek said once, science is not always what scientists do. The scientific world is political. It's based on grants. It's based on certain, if you've ever read The Structure of Scientific Revolution, certain paradigms that seem to work. Alien Abductions is not within the paradigm. It's close, but it's not really within it. And so whether this happens in my lifetime or not, I don't know, but I'm not going to bet the house that it will. So essentially, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Thank you. I was told I can take some questions and answers, if I have some other slides to show if we ever can dig them out, if anybody ever wants to see some actual drawings by abductees and all that. But let's take some Q&A first. Yes, sir.
Thanks for entertaining talk. Well, we all know that human beings feel the need to have some kind of myth. There's an aspect of
myth, yes.
Perception of reality. What does anybody think about that? Whether they're psychologists, psychiatrists, neurologists, what do they think about the role of human beings' need for mythology in this phenomenon?
The question is, what about the need for myth, folklore, mythology in this phenomenon, and in some way the myth impels them, psychiatrists, psychologists say they've been abducted by aliens. This actually, Carl Sagan, a American scientist, okay, well, he he talked about that. There's a folklorist named Thomas E. Bullard, his PhD in folklore. He's looked at the concept of myth and abductions, and he finds some parallels here and there, but basically he says not related.
Why?
Because because what is being described here is so unique. It is so different than anything else, and it's so against a person's own life and well-being. That is to say, when people come to me, they hope against hope that I can get it to stop. They don't want this to happen. They live in fear of it.
Might that indicate some form of recognised mental disability? That they have some kind of mental anguish that they would do?
Sometimes they do, yeah. Sometimes they do. There's no doubt about that. They do have a form of mental anguish that they wish to get rid of. Those are the ones who I tend to see. In fact, people who are just curious, I don't usually see them because they're leading a normal life. Everything is fine. I'm not going to disrupt it. But people who remember things, they remember lots of things, and who come to me, they fear for themselves. They fear for their children. The problem is the children oftentimes are already talking about, as one little kid called it, the Eggman coming into his room at night, you know, and the mother says, or the father says, oh, it's just a dream. It'll go just like a dream. But it doesn't go away. It continues to happen. It's a situation where people hope, they think, when they come to me, they hope they're crazy. They hope that it's not there, that they can live with being nuts, you know. Then they find out that they're not crazy, that they're not nuts. And the question then is, I ask them after a while, is it better to know or not to know? It's close. They say, on the whole, it's better to know. But in fact, some of them say, maybe I shouldn't have looked at this. It continues on after we work together. It doesn't stop. It doesn't seem to have anything to do with having some sort of gigantic myth in one's mind that is the same as everywhere else in the world, which means that you have a kind of collective unconscious in Mali that is tapping into the collective unconscious in London, that is tapping into the collective unconscious in Philadelphia. At that point, you're not in the scientific world. you're in sort of a never land. Although it's fun to think that, and I know that Carl was a guy who I knew and who just refused to look at the subject. He would not confront it.
I can well imagine.
My colleague Bud Hopkins said, look at. They met together in the back of a television show. It's called in a room, the green room. It's called, where you go in before you go on stage. You're on a television show together, and they started talking. And Hopkins said, "Look, if I ever find an abduction event or an abductee near your home in Ithaca, New York, near Cornell, would you like to investigate it with me?" He said, "Yes, that would be fine." A couple of months later, he did find one in Ithaca. And so he wrote to Carl, and Carl said he just didn't have the time to examine rumor-based material, rumors. Well, he had told him, yeah, he would, but even though it was happening literally a couple of miles from his house where he could have interviewed this guy, he refused to do it because that is the scientific community. It's out of the paradigm. His time is valuable. Why bother? You have to remember, this happens in groups. This happens intergenerationally. People are physically missing in real time. They come back with scars. None of this has anything to do with myth. This is reality, not myth. I think. I hope. Or I don't hope. Yes?
Is there any connection with sudden, inexplicable inabilities after the abduction event?
Sudden inexplicable inabilities after the abduction event. I find myself suddenly unable to remember what happened last week, or where my tie is, or those things which remain inexplicable to me. But other than that, no, they do not account. They can't remember what happened. happened to him during the hours of missing time. I once talked with an exceptionally famous scientist, not Carl Sagan, an exceptionally famous scientist. Exceptionally, I'm downplaying it by saying that. Who told me of an incident that happened to him? He had a lot of different incidents, but there was one that struck him. He said he and his wife were driving along, and they're on a highway, and they saw something. It was about 10:30 at night, and they saw something out the front windshield. There's a light in the sky at night. Suddenly, they looked at it, and suddenly there was a huge flash. They looked at each other and said, "What the hell was that? What just happened?" That was the phrase. What just happened? And they looked at the clock. It was now 12:30 at night. They were still on the same road, they were still driving, and they were still in the same place. That's two people. One's a scientist. That can only be explained on this earth in one way. The way I hear this kind of stuff all the time. To them it was more than astounding. It was beyond the ability to even slightly grasp. For me, that's just standard fare. Heard it a million times, happens all the time. So they don't remember that, but they have the inability to remember what happened to them. Yes, ma'am?
You set up cameras in these
I did.
What did you see it said?
This is what I see when I set up. In the old days, you could have a camera that would have a video tape recorder, and you could put it on a slow speed in the United States, and it would go for 8 hours. And the very first time I've had about a dozen people sleeping under these things in the old days. Now nobody has. The videotape technology is just, well, it's called trash now. Yeah. But you just throw it away, rubbish. But I ran down to this woman's house and said she was being abducted. One night, then another night, then another night. So that's it. I bought a camera. I put it on her dresser, and pointing at her bed. Now there's ethical things here involved, obviously, and she had to sign a waiver and all that. And then she could look at all the tapes herself and decide what to show me. I wasn't interested in anything except something really unusual going on. And so what we see is what we found, and I have this from other people as well. There's a videotape of him getting up in the middle of the night, and the tape is on, walking over to the camera, turning it off, blank. A videotape of them and telling me, you know, nothing's going to happen tonight. I'm just not going to turn that videotape on. I'm not going to turn it on. Or, followed by an abduction. Or, saying, I think I'll sleep on the couch in the living room now. I don't want to sleep in the bed. What's the sense of sleeping in bed? And followed by an abduction. But the ones that I like the best are when they walk over and you see their finger, and then it goes off.
But they'd do that if they were lying, wouldn't they? So you
They would.
can't prove anything.
Can't prove anything at all. Here's one, which is a little bit different. This poor woman called me up. I'd worked with her for a long time, and she called me and said, "David, I think something's going to happen. I feel this awful sense. I just have this sense of impending doom, as they call it. It's going to happen." And she's already put the kids. She had 2 small children. She's put the kids to bed, and now she's going to happen. And she's calling me, and she didn't know why, but I said, "Where are you?" She said, "Well, I'm lying on the living room floor." I said, "Well, get up. Remember that camera I sent to you?" Yeah. Where is it? It's in the closet. I forced her to go upstairs holding the phone, and she's dragging herself upstairs. Open the closet door, get out the box that the camera's in, never been taken out, set the damn thing up, pointed it on her, towards her bed, and get into bed. She's talking to me the whole time. I have this on tape and on audio tape. Talking to me the whole time, and then she's in bed. She would use long shoelaces to try to prevent abductions and tie it to her wrist and tie it to a bedpost, hoping that would stop what was going on. The next thing I know, I'm watching her sleep, and she gets up, unties herself, walks over, turns it off. The next split second, because it started, it was started again, then it starts at the point where it was turned off. So a split second later, there she is asleep in bed. Now the question is, who turned it on? Because if she had turned it on, we would see her pulling away, walking to the bed, pulling over the covers, getting into the bed, covering herself up, going to sleep. That's what we would see. That's not on the tape. These beings turned it on, so everything was fine. There's stuff like that. One time, there's a huge flash that we see in the room, and the person who's an abductee wakes up. What was that? What was that? And goes back to sleep. Then, after a few minutes, gone. She's gone. I think the tape stops, whatever. Then there's the people who, there's this one woman who I was taping. It's the whole world. I could write a book about these tapes. One is on a tape, and the tape is still on. She sees a bluish light coming into her window, and she knows that she had to go the other way and downstairs, followed by an abduction. Then she comes back and she realizes that the tape has been taping an empty bed, which is all I wanted to see, really. An empty bed. And that was bad. So she took the tape and a hammer and she pounded the hell out of that tape into 1,000 smithereens. And she felt better. Tapes don't work. Nobody has done what I've suggested. You have to have 2 cameras, both hidden, facing each other, installed by somebody who you don't know. That's the way to do it. Then you will get something, maybe, I think, I hope. This was done, many years done in the 80s, we tried this. I still have one woman who's sleeping under a camera, who lives in another state, lives in Colorado. Was about 2,500 miles from me. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
What do you think of research by Mary Rodwell, she proposes a third type of
I can't
contact?
hear you. Can you speak up?
I can't speak up, sorry.
No, I will repeat your question. There's a woman named Mary Rodwell who proposes
A third type of contact.
A third type of-
Starseeds. Starseeds.
starseeds. These would be aliens who are here to help us.
I don't know.
You know
what
about
they-
indigo children?
Yeah.
These are children
They're not
who,
necessarily children, but they're indigo children.
which means that
Well,
they're
special talents.
special talents, right.
Suddenly emerging among human population.
I don't know Mary Rodwell. I'm sure she's a wonderful person. The problem here is that people under hypnosis confabulate. And they confabulate oftentimes according to the agenda of the hypnotist. I have never heard that from anybody I have ever done work with. And my colleague Bud Hopkins and I, between the two of us, we looked at over 3,000 abduction events. We've never, ever heard that. That's not a good sign. Not a good sign. It's a bad sign. Here is where the flaw is for me. What I'm looking at is the abduction phenomenon. I've learned quite a bit about it over the years. There might be other beings who are here. I cannot prove a negative. There might be other beings here who are doing things to other people who I'm not aware of. I do know that the concept of contact is pure popular culture, even within the UFO research or abduction research community. People say they've been contacted by a being from outer space. There is no such thing as contact when this is intergenerational, begins in infancy and goes into old age. Concept is not a concept. A contact is not a concept. It's part of their lives. We do know that the children who are born to abductees are perfectly normal in every way, except they will be abductees. I have worked with adult children and then the mothers. I don't work with children at all. I'm not in the business of working with children. I only 21 and above, and I don't like 21. 31 and above, on the limit. 40 and above, better. I want them to have a settled life, even with this phenomenon. I don't want to disrupt that. But the people who I've worked with, they're smart, they're not smart. They're all over the map in terms of how of their mental functioning, in terms of being articulate or not, and things like that. So I've never encountered that, and if I've never encountered it, I tend to be extremely wary. I tend to have wariness about that. So when you talk about indigo children or starseed or special children, the children who I've met, who I don't work with, of abductees, are normal children. That's the best I can say. Yes?
Did you ever come across someone that's been abducted more than once?
All people are abducted more than once. There is no such thing as one person being abducted, period. It starts in infancy and goes with great frequency into old age. When people describe other people, there's a room where if it's a small place that they're in, they're not going to see any other people, but if it's a large place they're in, there's a special kind of room where they all sit there naked, waiting to be processed. These beings apparently work in a neighborhood. People can see their neighbors sometimes. Oh, that guy over there, I know him, he works at the 7-Eleven. It's a convenience store all over the United States. He's behind the counter at the 7-Eleven, I know who he is. They can see them. I asked them, well, do you see any elderly people around? Yes. Well, what do you mean by elderly? Oh, 60, 65, something. But when you get into 80, don't see them. Maybe it's because the abduction phenomenon started too soon, too late to see 80-year-olds. The evidence is overwhelmingly against that, because we know when it began to a degree. We have a very good hypothesis backed up by evidence as to when it began, which is last quarter of the 19th century. And but it might be that their usefulness in the program is over at certain points. We don't see blind people who, I want to talk to you about one last thing. Blind people who are abducted, people who have severe physical challenges, as they say in the United States, cerebral palsy, wheelchair people. We don't see that either. It's just not reported to us. People with diseases, sometimes I had a woman who's an abductee who has scleroderma, which is a sort of hardening of the skin, something you don't want to have. There's two kinds. She obviously had the light kind of, which was not life endangering, but she was an abductee. So the answer is, they're abducted all the time. It is amazing how much frequency they're abducted with. It's staggering. I won't even tell you. That's how staggering it is. Yes?
You mentioned a lot about the hypnotist influencing the reportee.
Absolutely.
How can you be sure that you haven't, throughout your study of thousands of people, influenced?
How can I be sure that because what I've learned a technique that is revolutionary. It's called being chronological and logical. You start from the A and you go slowly and carefully to B and then to C, and when they describe what's going on, then you can say the words after you've asked questions about what they had just said. Then you go to what happened next. I'm walking down a hallway. Oh, is it bright in the hallway? Is it dim in the hallway? How wide is the hallway? Are you walking fast or slow? Are you walking alone or not alone? You can ask questions like that. What happens next? Oh, we're going into another room. Oh, is it bright in that room? Is it dim? Is it a large room? What do you see in that room? This is logical and chronological. You don't inject anything into you're just following along with what they say. They direct you as to what questions you can ask. There are skips, and I'm allowing myself to back them up to see when they got their clothes off, or see what room they missed, or stuff like that. But we know that there are huge areas that are red flag areas. The problem is telepathy. When you hear the phrase, the aliens told me, that's the time to be not just careful, but maybe even not even to listen. Because the question you asked, that I asked many years ago, is what do you mean by telepathy? Are you hearing words? Syntax? Are you hearing impressions? That you just know that you have to do something. The first sense I had was that they were hearing impressions and their mind just converted to words so they can understand what they're saying. But having done, as I said, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these, I now think that they're hearing words, sentences, syntax. If that's the case, or if any of it is the case, what is to prevent people from hearing their own thoughts and thinking that they're coming from the outside and then telling you, well, the aliens told me that blah, 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 blah. The answer is nothing prevents that at all. They do it all the time. It's up to me to understand what's happening. And you get enough experience, and you do, and you understand, oh, well, that's interesting. Now let's just say they tell me something I've never heard before. I've never heard this. I'm going to put this aside and wait for other people to repeat the same thing who are unaware of this testimony. And if nobody else ever repeats it, it isn't evidence. There are some exceptions to that. Some people I've worked with for decades, and they're extremely careful in what they know the root. They're extremely careful in what they say. And they'll say to me sometimes, you know, I don't know whether I'm hearing this from them or I'm just making this up. I can't tell you that exactly, David. And then they'll go ahead and tell me what it is. But they're giving me this caveat, this beware. Because they know the problems themselves. They've been with me long enough to know the problems. So you want to be logical and chronological. I can't tell you how difficult that has been for people. I don't know why. But here, you know, when I first started doing this story, the very first session I ever did, very first one, numero uno, this woman tells me, and I was thrilled and nervous that this was going to happen. An abductee was going to come to my house, and I was going to boil her brain in some way. I was going to do it. And it was, and I was so nervous, I wrote out an induction on a 5x3 card, and I put it in a palm of my hand so that she wouldn't see it, and I sat behind her a little bit, her head, while she lay on a couch, and I had a little tape recorder there with a condenser mic and all that. And I read this thing out as if I was a pro doing it all the time, you know. And she was a channeler. Channeling, in my scientific method of thinking, is basically one part of the brain gets in touch with another part of the brain and interprets it as coming from somewhere up high. Channeling goes back probably to the Greeks. The Oracle of Delphi, where a special priest could only communicate with the Oracle and tell the king what day to start a war, or whatever it was. And I won't go into the history of channeling, but it's one of the oldest forms of psychic phenomenon. There's a whole, people used to channel dead people mainly, you know, get in touch with them. Then eventually they got in touch with spirits of people. Then eventually they got in touch with spirits who lived in the ether and not here. And as the time went, as years went on, they got in touch with alien spirits. Then eventually just aliens. And so we have a lot of experience with channeling. It's not good. It does not give us any information about the abduction phenomenon. Let's put it that way, any whatsoever. So she was a channeler. She offered seminars on people for people on how to do channeling. She was heavily into it. So I read this thing off. She goes into a quote trance, which is really just relaxed and focused situation. And she tells me the following story. We had agreed we would look at a story when she was a young child. I think she was 6 or 7 or something like that. She remembered looking on the ground, looking at a buttercup flower, whatever it was. She was with a friend. Somebody grabbed her around the waist, took her up into this object. That's what she remembered, a few other things. So she's in the park. She's looking down. I'm taking this thing. Everything is wonderful. She goes into the. She Suddenly, somebody's feeling her, lifting her up, takes her into this room, removes her clothes, puts her on a table. The guy is wearing a page boy haircut. I'm thinking, huh? But, all right, okay, what do I know? It's the very first session I ever did. Then he does an examination of her, and there's a reproductive examination, a genital examination she's very embarrassed to tell me about. He takes her off the table and they walk down the hallway. And in the hallway she meets a small gray alien, and she's required to put her hands on the gray alien's head. And when she does that, she feels love and warmth and affection emanating from him, and then when she takes her hands off, it's gone. And they continue down a hallway, and they go into another hallway, into another room rather, and there's a council of aliens sitting around a table, and they tell her that when she grows up, she's going to be beautiful and intelligent and loyal and brave and courageous and strong and a true American or whatever she's going to be. And then they get her back, take her back, put her clothes back on, and bring her back. And I thought, oh my God, I've done it. I have done it. I've done hypnosis with an abductee. I've got this whole story. I was like astounded. It worked. It was amazing. It was sensational. And that night, I went upstairs to transcribe everything onto my, for you computer buffs here, 8088 dual floppy computer. And now probably worth $5 million, but I just junked it eventually. I realized after 1 second that I could be heard on that tape, and not a word could be heard that she whispered. And I couldn't hear anything there was nothing of her on that tape at all. It was just an occasional grunt. That was it. And I just broke into a cold sweat. Oh my God, I've lost it. I've lost this treasure. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. I said, well, I'll remember what she said. You cannot do that in terms of memory. That's just not going to happen. So she came to me for another session, and several months went by, and I said, Melissa, remember that first session that we did? I had a little trouble with that tape recorder, and I felt like an idiot saying that. I said, can we do that one again? She said, oh, sure. She's looking at a buttercup. By this time, I learned to put a microphone on her or next to her, and not. She's looking at a buttercup. She feels the hands on her. She's taking a got page boy haircut. She had a name for him, as a matter of fact, Cosmo. She taken on board, clothes taken off, put on a table. This to her, that to her is a reproductive examination. She's very, very embarrassed to tell me about. Take her off the table, put her clothes back on, bring her back home. I said, Melissa, look, remember last time you talked about how you walked down a hallway and you put your hands out on this alien's head? She said, I don't remember that happening. I said, well, what about when you walked into this room, council, and you were going to be a wonderful person when you grew up and all that? She said, I think that happened to my friend Lydia, not to me. That was when I knew I was a complete idiot, that I did not know what I was doing. That was a gift given to me that some people never get. It was a gift. I knew right then and there that this was trickier than I thought, and I better put those controls that I talked about into place. That's the story of my life. Am I done?
Almost. Could we have just one more question, quickly, and quick answer? I think the session should come to an end.
Quick answer, I can't guarantee.
Or one or two combined together?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, are these guys good guys or bad guys, or we don't know, or whatever? What's your assessment of these?
Well, I can say this with a smile. This is disastrous. I do not like what I see. I used to be thrilled to death. This was just the most astounding thing, and the more I learned about it, the less I liked. Now I live in fear of it, to tell you the truth. I think it is awful. I think it is disastrous. Let's just use the word catastrophic. How's that?
Why?
I have not gone into, you'll notice I have not gone into what the abduction phenomenon actually is. We have not talked about what happens to people when they're abducted. This was just an argument to show how if this is not happening, it's the most important thing ever. But I think it is the most important thing ever, no matter what. And it is happening, and it is secret. And you have to understand that secrecy means one thing, and one thing at the bottom line. It means, I wrote a chapter just on secrecy once, but I didn't get it. Because I couldn't funnel it into just a couple of words. And the words are, they don't want us to know what they're doing. That is the bottom line that is irrefutable if you think that this is happening and this is secret. They don't want us to know what they're doing. Because we find a way to stop it in some way. They think, but it's not going to happen. There's too much water under the bridge. This has gone on too long. We don't know the ultimate reasons. I'm now skipping to Z, all the way from not A to Z. We don't know the ultimate reasons. I'm not exactly telling you everything here. For why they're doing what they're doing. It's still a major question in abduction research. They don't tell abductees, and therefore we don't know. But from all I've learned, I've learned that this is, it just isn't good. This is done for their agenda, not for ours. They're not here to help us. They're not here to make kids smart. They're not here to make us smarter. We're not going to join a galactic community. It's nothing like that. It's nothing that's in popular culture. It's almost unimaginable what they're doing. You got to remember, it's a global phenomenon. As a global phenomenon, there's an enormous amount of time and energy, personnel put into this, and it's been going on for quite a while, which means that time is on their side. And if you take a look at scientific communities and the academic community, they couldn't care less, which is just fine with them. Last question.
Thanks.
I ducked your question.
Could you make it just 10 seconds and the answer 1 minute?
No worries. Your abductees, would you describe them on average as happy or not happy?
It runs the gamut. Once they work with me, they become happy. Because they've talked about it, they know about it, they're in control. I promise to give them, if they come long enough, I don't charge anything for what I do, they can come as many times as they want. But if they come long enough, I say we can gain some sort of intellectual and emotional control of the situation. Physical control I cannot give them. I can't stop it from happening. Once they get it into memory, and once they get this emotional control, and once they say, I don't care anymore, they get on with a normal life. It's like a ship that's off to one side. I try to right it. And then after I've had maybe 20 sessions with them, they'll call me up and they say, David, you know, I can't make it to the session today. I've got car trouble. The car's in the garage. Can't make it. I'll have to make another day. And I know I've won a victory. I smile at them because I know I'll never have another session with them. They are now at the point where they don't care anymore, and they have a normal life, and that's what I work for.
One more quick question. Sorry, has any of your 1,100 people not come back?
No, it's not. I'm sorry. I've given you misleading facts. Not 1,100 people. 1,100. I've worked with 150 people over long periods of time and looked at 1,150 or so, or 1,200 different events. Now, I also have my colleague Bud Hopkins, who has worked with maybe 1,000 people and had about 1,500 events that he's looked at. So the two of us combined are.
Has any of those people not come back?
No, everybody comes back. Everybody's come back, period. We don't have a case of that. Of not coming back, is what she's asking. Thank you so much. I appreciate you being here.
Thank you.